Hey everybody, welcome to Special Codes Episode 2. I'm Nathan,
And I'm Taylor.
and we're going to be covering binary today. Some of you may be wondering, what's the purpose of Special Codes? Well, we are here to use code to interpret the world around us in a meaningful way that builds us up and makes us more human. And today, we're going to be specifically looking at binary. And as we jump into this conversation about binary, we want to make sure and clarify that this is not a tech tutorial, right, Taylor?
Correct.
We're not going to get into the nitty gritty of things, but what we are going to do is we're going to kind of create a foundation in which we can create a language to use in the midst of talking about this. So, since binary is a super techie thing, Taylor is our amazing tech guy.
Hooray.
Right, yeah. And he's going to kind of give us a little rundown of what binary is so that we can create that foundation. So, Taylor, why don't you take it away?
Okay, so as Nathan said, this is just going to be a very surface level overview of what binary is. The basic idea of binary is using a base 2 numbering system. And now some of you might be asking, what in the world does that mean? Well, the best way to think of it is our normal numbering system that we use is base 10. Because if you think about it, we go from 0 to 9. There are 10 numbers in there. As soon as we go past 9, we get to 10. We flip that 9 to a 0. Then we move over to the next spot, which was the 10 spot, and put a 1 there. Think of binary as the same thing, just instead of going 0 through 9, we go 0 through 1, and as soon as we get to 2, we flip that 2 to a 0, and then we move over to the 10 slot, which in this case would be the 2 slot, and put a 1. So in binary, 1, 0 isn't 10, it's 2.
Awesome. Are there any other number systems out there?
Yes, actually, there's quite a lot. There's been quite a history with different numbering systems in the world as well. For instance, the Babylonians used a base 60 numbering system, which is, I'm sure you can already imagine, would be very difficult to keep track of, but they made it work.
Yeah, it's 60 different characters you have to remember. Like, it's like, what was 52? I can't remember.
Yes. And if you're in the tech space, you're also familiar probably with hexadecimal, which is base 16. And in case you're wondering, because you're asking, okay, well, what symbol do you use after you go after 9? Well, then you start with the alphabet. So 10 in base 16 is A, the letter A. And then you just go up to the alphabet till you get to 15, and then you flip over the same way.
Interesting.
So,
I didn't know about the alphabet thing. That's kind of cool.
yep.
So do we use the 16, what's it, hexadecimal system anywhere in today's culture? Do we see it somewhere? Or is it just like this enigma thing that tech people know?
Well, let me give you a pop culture example from about 10 years ago. Have you played Skyrim?
Horse! Yeah!
So if you've ever played with the command line in there and given yourself items you shouldn't have, the item ID for that is in hexadecimal. Hexadecimal is used in computers in multiple different ways as ways of representing things, because it's sometimes easier than using a base 10 because computers use binary, and you go from 2, 4, 8, 16. So hexadecimal is just along that track.
What you were doing there is you're
Double. It's
times
double.
2. Yeah, okay.
Doubling.
Why do computers use binary as the base, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, binary is the base language for all computers, correct?
Correct. Everything that happens in a computer is a result of either a 0 or a 1 going through the processor, basically. And the reason we have binary instead of, say, base 10 is because binary is so much more stable than a base 10 system. And to explain what I mean by that, think of it this way. A 0 is off and a 1 is on. In a base 10 system, you have off and then slightly on, slightly more on, more on, more on, until totally on. And over time, when your system starts to age and degrade, you start sending it signals and it will get more and more easily confused as to what signal you're sending. So binary is incredibly stable because it's just off where it's on. There's a signal or there's not a signal.
That makes sense. I like your moron. So a binary eliminates the morons.
It does.
Awesome. So it's more stable. It's an on and off switch. So like a light switch is like your basic binary on off, right?
Correct.
That's kind of cool. So when it comes to a system using, let's say they use like a base 16 instead of a base 10, because you said it was something that tech people used. Why wouldn't a computer use a 16 or even maybe like a base 4 or another base system?
It just comes back to the stability thing. You could probably use it. It's just over time, it's more easily degradable and confusable to the machine itself.
Interesting.
So even like a base 3 system, you could make it work, but it's just a function of over time. Binary is basically the best system to use.
Right. So it kind of goes back to like system integrity, where if even just with a base 3, that moron piece that's in there starts to lose itself and eventually will become an on off switch, right?
Right.
And the system can't distinguish between those. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Other bases within a computer would eventually degrade into jumbled messes.
Yeah, well, I could see that. And the crazy thing is, as we watch technology grow, it changes so fast. To see that change happen with a code that was old school, like I could see that degradation or that degrading of integrity happen a lot. So, as we have been working together to talk about the core of what we come to, so we've kind of talked and set a good foundation of binary. And remember, we're not a tutorial, but we wanted to connect something that all computers communicate with and how that connects with us being more human. How do we, or how could we see some of the things that binary maybe connects with us in the world? Have you seen anything?
Well, I mean, in everyday conversation, everybody's always striving for binary solutions to everything. Everything wants one thing to be this exact thing versus this other thing. It's like the whole quest for good and evil. We always view things as wholly one or wholly the other,
Yeah.
and no in between. Binary is an inherent concept that we as humans strive for. We just don't really understand at the time what it is we're looking for.
Interesting. Now, you said something that was interesting that I've not heard before. You said we strive for a binary solution. What is a binary solution?
Well, like the good or evil, is this good or evil?
So it's like
Do
black
you,
and white.
yes. Do you want soda or do you want water? Is that kind of a thing. We like breaking things down to the most basic components and choosing off of those. We want stability in our choices, especially in the good versus evil. We want to make sure this is good and this is evil that we're choosing against or for, right?
Hmm.
It's basically our nature to get the most stable choice we can.
That's interesting. As I'm listening to you talk about this, I'm thinking about myself. And I'm one of those people who, if you tell me I have an egg or bacon, which would you like? I'm saying let's put them both together because they're delicious.
Right. Make them one thing.
Right. I'm the person who comes in and breaks that stability because it's like, don't give me an either or. I want a both and.
But even in that example, you've taken two separate things and made them a binary thing.
Made
Like
it.
a sandwich, you've taken several things and put them together into one thing.
Oh, interesting.
Well, even whole meals, we say, what did you eat? And you say, I ate dinner or I ate supper. You've combined all of these things into one thing.
To make it a simple form.
Correct. Now, obviously, there's going to be exceptions to the rule because humans are humans and we often just do things unpredictably and nobody thinks the same way and nobody does the same things.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing to bring up in this conversation because with kind of what we're talking about, one of the things about binary is it is very black and white. It's very on or off, right? And I was just thinking, how would that look in human society if that's the only way we communicated? Or if that's the only thing, like on off, what would that look like? Like it is. And I think we've seen examples of this throughout history in some sense
Mhm.
of areas where this, I mean, going back to good and evil, it's like this is good, this is evil. And in that dichotomy, we have not left room for the exceptions. And
Right.
like you said, there's always those. And so I think that there is a beauty in humans not using binary. Wouldn't you say that's true?
I would agree. I would also go as far as to say I think it's dangerous for humans to use binary because, like in the case of good or evil, or even let's just remove philosophy from it. Let's just talk about a sandwich.
Okay.
So you have various things you could put on a sandwich. You have mustard, bacon, peanut butter, jelly, and you say you want to boil it down as a human, say, I just want a sandwich. Does mustard and peanut butter make a sandwich? Does jelly and eggs and bacon make a sandwich? Technically, yes. Would it be a good sandwich? If you don't take into account all of the nuance to a situation, you might end up with a really weird sandwich,
Mhm.
but you would get exactly what you asked for.
Well, and that actually is interesting because even in one of my classes, my students are interacting with one another, and I just did a get to know you kind of thing. And in math, one of the things that we kind of like to show students, especially as they're growing up, because it's about problem solving, that there are multiple ways to get to the right answer. And just because the way you got there is different than somebody else's doesn't mean your way was wrong necessarily. I mean, it's not always the case, but one of the things that we asked the kids to do was say, if somebody orders a hot dog, are they getting a sandwich?
Uh-huh.
And it was really amazing to see the responses that we had. Actually, I had a conversation with one of my students, and they were like, I don't understand why a hot dog could be a sandwich. It's a hot dog. I was like, well, what is a sandwich? It's like, well, it's bread and something in between. I was like, well, what's a hot dog? Two pieces of bread that are put in between. We have Philly cheesesteaks. You know, they don't cut all the way through a Philly cheesesteak sometimes. Does the bread need to be complete? I mean, there was just so much there. And she's like, it's a hot dog.
Well, see, even in things like that, a lot of people just want basic ideas. Just tell me what a sandwich is and what it isn't. We find discussions like, are hot dog sandwiches? Are X and X things sandwiches? Whereas some people just don't want to have that discussion and say, no, this is a sandwich, this isn't a sandwich. It's like, well, are you sure? And I think that that kind of mentality, that kind of binary mentality, in some degrees, I would say is helpful, but it also leads to the lack of nuance
Mm.
in discussions.
Yeah, I would also add on to that and say it almost eliminates some creativity. I mean, when I think about the conversation of getting creativity of things or those accidents, I think of one of my favorite people to watch is Bob Ross. And can you imagine Bob Ross as a binary person?
That would be funny.
I mean, like, binary says you have to do something. So just at the beginning of his episodes, when he has all of those crazy names of colors, this is pink, this is yellow. And it drives some people nuts. It's like, just call it what it is. It's yellow. Why do you have to call it dandelion in the summer yellow? But those are the kind of things that made watching that so interesting is what shade of yellow is he using? But also with the things that Bob Ross did in there, he took his happy little accidents and made them into some beautiful artwork. And I think that without that skill or that ability, we would lack a lot of stuff.
If I talked to you and said 1010110001110001, let's just pretend that's how our language worked. We only had two letters, and how we used them gave what we said meaning. Think of Morse code as an example. It's dots and dashes, and spaces too, but sometimes they can be hard to distinguish. You can learn Morse code. You can actually speak in a form of binary right now today, but the society at large doesn't speak in Morse code. Most people don't know Morse code.
And to add to that too, what Morse code and binary lack is inflection. The nuance of communication also includes the tone and everything that goes into what we say.
Right. Exactly. Like if I were to speak to you in binary, it would take forever. It
Hmm.
would take a lot longer to say, "Hi, how are you?" Now, obviously, if you trained in Morse code, you could get a message out pretty quickly, but that involves heavy training, which a lot of people in their everyday lives just wouldn't do just to speak to each other.
Hmm.
Binary is very, very efficient and safe for computers. The reason computers can use it is because computers are exponentially faster at communicating than we are. It wouldn't be effective for us to communicate in binary, but it is almost essential for computers.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that we're talking about communication too. I want to bring it to like the written language of it because like I was looking into one of my passions is watching some anime. I'll admit I like to watch some anime, but when it comes to learning or listening to or reading the Japanese language that comes with that, I was just interested and I did some research on this. And when it comes to just the Japanese language, they have three different styles of writing, and I believe it's kanji is the one in which they use. It's kind of an adaptation of Chinese symbols, I think. Don't quote me on this. But one of the beautiful things about the language or the written form of it is that in one character, it communicates a very complex idea. Whereas what you were saying is binary would be like 0100001110. In Japanese, where the letter is placed within the context of an entire character as well brings deeper meaning to it. And even for us as Americans, me speaking English, I was like, huh? Your letters actually have deeper meaning, or your character, like A is A to me. It doesn't mean these are legs of people, you know?
Right.
And it blows my mind to think about how complex just even that language is in its ability to communicate deep meaning in a short amount of time.
Right. Yeah, it's impressive. We as humans use more complex forms of communication than binary, and it's more efficient for us to use. And for a time, it might be more efficient for a computer as well, but it would eventually break down.
Hmm.
Now, I do
Well,
have to say, our forms of communication often break down
right.
as well.
I was just gonna say, complexity does not always beget a stability, right? And I think it goes back to
Right.
that. I think like because we have this deep beauty or this deep ability to communicate complexly, there's also a lot of instability or ability for miscommunication to happen.
Binary safe, binary stable, but you can lack so many things if you restrict yourself to it.
Right. And I was just thinking, like, if we were in a society where you and I were communicating and we said hi in binary 10111100 with no inflection, no anything, my ability to interpret what you said could not be. Uh, you said hi. There's no backtone. There's no subtleness behind that. There's nothing there. Whereas if in our world, if I were like, hi, how are you? Like there's joy behind what I'm saying. Whereas if I were to say like, hi, how are you? The way in which we say it can be interpreted. Whereas if
Yes.
binary, it would just be like, hi.
Yes. Yes.
which is crazy. And I think even though that would be stability, I don't know, would you be willing to give up the complexity and the nuances that allow our world for stability in language?
I don't think I would. I would say if everybody switched to binary and all we did was just say the things that we meant without any emotion behind them, I think we would have more stability, more safety, maybe. That's not a guarantee because we as humans are often unpredictable. However, I think we would lose some sense of adventure. We would lose some sense of looking forward. I don't know how best to describe it.
Yeah,
Creativity.
no, I think you're right on it. I think this goes back to like our point and our purpose for this is as we're diving into these languages, as we're diving into coding, I think you hit a really important thing. As humans, what makes us human? What makes us able to do these things? For people who might be listening, some of you might be in that black and white. The world around us is this or this. And I want to say, and I think I want to specifically speak to those people right now and just say, like, hey, maybe you're missing out on some joy for safety. Yes, that is a safe place to be. And there are times where we need safety, right?
Yeah.
But if safety is all we seek, in a lot of ways, it can become a prison. It can become something that captures us. And in a lot of ways, makes us less than what we were meant to be, which is what the purpose of this podcast is to say, like, hey, let's look at the beauty that we are. Binary allows us to see in ourselves and in our society, yeah, sure, we have some messed up stuff that happened, but is that going to stop us from being who we are? It's safe to be binary, but also we need the complexity. And I think of like when we look at that, the complexity helps us create things, right? Like penicillin, electricity, science. We push against those things that are black and white.
Right. Throughout history, there have been quote unquote black and whites like the sound barrier. You couldn't go past the sound barrier. It's called the sound barrier for a reason because it's a barrier. Well, we broke it.
Yeah, we broke that barrier.
We did. Now, I know we've been talking about binary and how it's maybe not so useful to us humans and we would lack some things, but I would also like to put out there that there are times where binary is helpful.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
especially in life or death situations or in times where you don't have time necessarily to view the nuance of a situation. Let's put this into like a sci-fi setting. You're on a spaceship and a missile is heading towards you. You don't have time to contemplate what the missile is made out of or go over every schematic of your ship and know what it can do. In that situation where something is coming towards you and it's life or death, you have a choice to act or not act. And in that situation, you don't have time to mull over everything. You have to do something. You have to reduce things down to their most basic overarching components in order to do anything.
Yeah, I'd agree. One, I think too, as a society, as a people in a society, like one of the things that you said is that a yes or no, or a this or like, or this is what we're going to do. It really helps give direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
I saw a meme as we're coming out of this COVID craziness. I saw a meme of a intersection and they had painted on it an old arrow that pointed to the right and it said right only. And then they had at some point changed the direction and put a left thing over the right, but they didn't get rid of the right. And so when you came up to the intersection, which way am I supposed to go? I think in society sometimes we need direction. We
Yes.
need we need to say this is what we are doing, not the willy-nilly. And I think a lot of people are more on board with short-term, yes, this is it, or clear and concise things. And yeah, some people don't like that. Like, you're not telling me what to do. I'm a rebel. But I think
We
that
all have that.
yeah, that's right. We all have it. But I think we all desire for that direction to be given to us from somewhere that's clear and concise.
There are very useful times for somebody to just say, this is what we're doing and this is what we're not doing.
Hmm.
Like traffic lights. Red means stop, green means go.
Right.
There is no contemplating the meaning, deeper meaning behind the traffic light. This is what it is and this was what it's not. This is what you're doing.
Yeah.
And
I
if people don't follow that, that's when accidents happen. That's when unnecessary chaos happens.
yeah.
Life is full of chaos. There are ways we can curb the more unnecessary chaos. I don't know how better to say it.
Hmm. Yeah.
That being said, we shouldn't fear all chaos, I think.
Oh yeah. I totally agree with you. Well, and I think that that's the thing though, is that when we talk about fear, it's kind of the opposite of safety. And so I think fear can leave us in a black and white, in a binary world. And if we're always fearful, it really does prevent us from being innovative. I love what we came up with here. Instability begets innovation in an environment absent of fear and complacency. I think that when we allow ourselves a little bit of instability or non binary, when we are able to be fearless and not complacent with just what we are, like in our safety net, we have the amazing ability to be innovative.
Well, I would say that fear isn't necessarily a bad thing
No, no, it's good.
because there's sometimes it's good to be fearful of things like there is an angry bull in that field. I'm scared of it, so I'm not gonna jump the fence and run across that field because that thing is angry and huge.
Hmm.
That's not necessarily bad to be scared of it. Fear can be a motivator. If I don't get this project done, then I'm going to fail this class. I don't want that to happen. I'm scared of that. So it'll motivate me to get what I need done. I think the best way of putting it is fear and complacency together, I would say, are killers.
Mm. When you're comfortable and led by fear.
When you're too scared to not be comfortable.
When you're too scared to not cross that field because you want to see what. No. When you use the bull analogy, it makes me want to. I would be the person to say, like, I wonder how far I could get.
But fear is a very useful emotion and feeling that we as humans have, and it shouldn't be ignored. I think in society and everywhere, with anything, there are going to be people who are irrationally scared of anything and everything. Like, for instance, one of the fears that I had as a child was fear of the dark. To some degree, it's still in the back of my mind whenever I can't see. When I'm walking through the darkness, I'm like, what's in there? Something's gonna jump out at me. As a
Ye-
kid, I couldn't sleep in the dark.
Uh, so when I was a kid talking about fear, I always played games in the sense that, like, if I knew there was a dark place, I would run as fast as I could to get past that. And in the back of my mind, I was afraid something was going to come out and grab me if I
Mm-hmm.
walked too slow. And so I sped up. And even today as an adult, I kind of play that game with myself. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, this is kind of a dark place. And I get not necessarily, I don't know if excited, but my adrenaline pumps. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
it's a dumb thing, like dark and trying to get out of there or jump into bed so that something doesn't grab your feet.
Well, I think there's a difference between an irrational, damaging fear and an irrational fear that's based somewhat in reality but exaggerated. The fear of the dark, there's a reason to be concerned when you're wandering around, you can't see where you're going. Because especially if you're in an unfamiliar environment, you could hurt yourself. Or if you're out in the wilderness, there could be something, some wild animal or something there that could get you. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to be concerned or worried about the dark. I think the problem is when you're in your house and you're sitting there at your door, too scared to go out to the hallway down to the bathroom because you think there's a monster gonna jump out at you.
Mm-hmm.
When it
Unless,
becomes debilitating, I think that's the problem.
yeah, unless you live in my house, and it is quite possible that Nathan's gonna jump out at you.
That's true, you might.
Yeah. I think this is a good foundation for binary. And honestly, as we're continuing this conversation, I think that we want to start the conversation. This is not a conclusion. We might have said some things that maybe helped you, maybe made you angry. I don't know. The thing about us as humans is there is a complexity to us, and that is beautiful. But one of the things that we'd like you to do is communicate with us, right?
Right. Giving us a well thought out comment. If you disagree with us or you don't like what we said, feel free to say so. I would just ask that your criticism would be constructive.
Mhm.
Because if all you say is, you're an idiot, it's like, okay, well, I'm an idiot. That doesn't help me.
Right. As we further talk along too about some of these code things, like you can call me that, but that does not necessarily make it true.
I mean, it may be true, but calling me an idiot and not telling me why isn't going to help me change.
Yeah, it's not going to help me become more human. Communicate that with us. And like we said, we're not experts. We don't have our doctorates in all of this, right?
We're just two guys talking on the internet, and we may very well be wrong about everything, but that's what conversations are for. We're here to discuss these things, and if we're wrong, we want to know if this helps you at least think about these concepts, and if it helps you, then great.
We've accomplished our goal. We're becoming more human. I think that's the biggest thing. And the next episode, we're going to be going further into binary, but we're going to be specifically talking about the logic behind it. Is that right?
What actually is happening on the mechanical, technical level inside the computer.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get a little bit more into some gates, right?
Logic gates,
Ooh,
circuit board stuff.
I love that. I love that conversation. So it's gonna be an exciting one because I live most of my life with an OR gate. And that's not always the best thing to do. But if you want to know more about that, join us next time, right?
Yes.
All right. Have a good one, everyone.
Maybe I'll show you an AND gate.
There you go. Yes, creating more safety and stability with those AND gates, but also, anyways, you'll have to join us next week. Any last comments, Taylor?
I think that's about covered it. I would just like to remind people this isn't any tutorial, this isn't anything official. And we would just ask that if you have a comment or if it helped you, let us know. And if there's something that we could do to improve, let us know that too.
Yeah, we're all for constructive criticism. Well, thanks, guys. Have a great week, great life, and we'll see you next episode.
Thanks, everyone.